Hey, what's up? Jeff Lerner here, and today we're talking about my $400,000 lesson in franchising. Before I was a successful entrepreneur, I was a horribly, woefully, laughably, ironically unsuccessful entrepreneur to the tune of over $400,000 in debt because of my experience with franchising. And I'm going to tell you all about it, not because I'm saying you should never own a franchise or you should never buy a franchise, but because if you're going to, it's better to learn from people that didn't do it the right way so that you can be smarter and make better choices. Okay, so welcome. We're going to talk about my $400,000 lesson in owning a franchise. A little bit of background. So I was 27, probably 26 when I started the application process, 27 when I actually was awarded the franchise. And I basically took, what was my life savings at the time, which amounted to 20% of about a $300,000 deal. So I was able to scrape together $60,000 and put that down as a down payment to get an SBA secured or SBA guaranteed loan from a bank to start a franchise. The SBA is the Small Business Administration in the United States. That's basically the program that the government has to supposedly kind of pre-vet these opportunities and say, yeah, this is a business model that we feel confident in at least partially guaranteeing the loan value to the banks so that the banks will feel more confident in lending on these opportunities to business owners or entrepreneurs that don't have as much capital or experience as they might otherwise have to meet the bank's lending requirements. And so in that way, the government is essentially promoting opportunities for people that might not otherwise be able to get loans from banks. They're sort of incentivizing banks via an insurance policy to make loans they might not otherwise make. So I guess there's like a nobility in concept to that, but the more I've learned about what it really means to take on an SBA loan, and also how the SBA program works, how franchises get approved for the SBA, and also just a lot of deeper truths about franchising in general. The more I will say in general, caveat emptor, right? The buyer beware. There's just a lot to know. You go on these, franchising websites, franchise.com, franchisegator.com, you go to franchising trade shows, you pick up, Entrepreneur, Small Business Opportunities magazine, you flip to the back and there's all these business opportunities offering franchising. There's a whole industry out there, not just of selling franchisees into the opportunities promoted by franchisors, but even there's an industry prior to that of people, consultants who go find successful businesses and they sort of sell the business creator on the concept of turning their model into a franchise. So for example, I have a digital marketing agency called Awesome Marketing. I have been approached by people say, hey, you have an agency that does a good job of enrolling small businesses and helping local businesses with their marketing. Did you know that there are thousands of marketing professionals out there or aspiring business owners that would love to be able to buy a quote turnkey agency model that comes with an operations manual, that comes with branding, that comes with processes, that comes with products and a menu of pricing and all this, essentially all these decisions that are already made for them, and they could buy a franchise in your business. And I'm like, okay, but I've been on the other side of franchising and I kind of know what the model's really about, and that just doesn't really sound like my cup of tea, thanks but no thanks. I'd rather teach people how to start an agency, which I actually do through Entre. We have a program called Entre Agency that teaches education on how to create your own digital agency. But I don't really want to franchise mine. I mean, the legalities and the structure and the formalities around that term franchise are very specific. They mean very specific things. And here's my problem. I'll say this in general, and then I'll share kind of my specific experience with this. My general problem with franchisee economics is this. Franchisors transfer all the risk onto franchisees. Essentially, they say, we want to keep growing our brand, but we don't want to have to borrow any money. So we'll get independent people. In fact, we'll go apply for SBA certification so that we can get independent business owners who actually aren't financially stable enough to qualify for those levels of financing on their own. We'll go through a vetting process with the SBA and do whatever we have to do to kind of meet certain standards so that they'll actually give loans to people that are less stable and less qualified qualified. Frankly, people like Jeff Lerner was when he was 26 years old. Honestly, Jeff Lerner at 26, I was a jazz musician. The money that I cobbled together came from years and years of tip jars. I shouldn't have been getting a $300,000 loan to open a restaurant. I never even worked in a restaurant. I never even waited tables before. There was no way I should have been getting that loan back then. But the franchisor had gone through the steps with the SBA to create this sense of security for the bank that they could take a chance on this 26-year-old kid who was way in over his head, right? Dealing with factors that he wasn't equipped to handle at the time. Economic factors. I opened it in 2007, right before a recession. It's a model that, who did it transfer the risk to, right? Who ended up with the destroyed credit? Who ended up with over $400,000 in debt? I was actually $492,000 in total debt. Well, that was my actual balance sheet when all the dust settled after my franchise went out of business, and I had the bank loan. I had 4 years left on a 5-year lease. I had unpaid inventory bills. I had unpaid sales taxes. I had unpaid, payroll taxes. I had, the last 2 weeks of employees. I had them coming after me for payroll. I had, right? $492,000, 28-year-old kid. Prior to that, he was a jazz musician. That guy never should have been put in that situation, but it was this structure that, supposedly creates opportunity that again, the franchisor, they got paid. They got paid their franchise fee. They got paid their royalty on every single unit that I sold. It was a quick serve restaurant. I sold pita sandwiches for $5. Every $5 sandwich, I think it was 8%. 8% of that $5 sandwich. So what's that? 40 cents. 40 cents on every sandwich. Thousands and thousands of sandwiches went right to the franchisor. They already got paid. They offloaded all the risk onto a 26-year-old kid. And that's my fundamental problem with it, is they're not partners in your business. The franchisor will pitch themselves as saying, we're partners in your business. When you grow, we grow, and you're our brand ambassador, and we rely on you to spread awareness and to grow our brand. BS. Partners have equal financial risk. If somebody's a partner in your business and there's a cash call and you go, shoot, man, we need 10 grand to make payroll. If they're your partner, you're calling them to put in money. Or if they aren't able to make the cash call, their capital account rebalances and now you own more of the business than they do. Your franchisor, they are not your partner because they take their money off the top. They got paid. They're like the government. When you sell a $5 sandwich, you collect an extra 6 or 8% or whatever for sales tax. That goes to the state. And then the next 8 or 10 or 6 or 12 or whatever the next percentage is, that goes to the franchisor. Then and only then do you get to start running your business. So don't think for 1 second that they're your partner. When they're taking money, they're taking first dollars out right off the top, and they transferred all the risk onto you. If that loan defaults, it's not on the franchisor. It's not going to mess up their credit. It's going to mess up your credit. Take it from me, right? So I just have a fundamental problem with the franchisor-franchisee relationship because I think that it's, at least the way it plays out, is it's promoted as a deceptive. I got to be careful with these words. Like I'm not saying it's an overt act of deceit. I'm just saying that there's sort of an implied level of partnership and we're in this together. That like it's not how it plays out. And you look at all the documentation when you sign to purchase a franchise, you have to sign a document called the UFOC. UFO. That's what I wanted to say to him later. You me, right? Can I say that? But no, the UFOC, the Uniform Franchising Offer Circular, I think is what that stands for. And it's this document that circulates amongst all the franchisees that they have to issue legally, where basically if you read this big fat document and you read all the fine print, it's like, yeah, you have all the risk, you have all the responsibility, we hold all the cards, we hold all the strings. If we don't like what you do, we can revoke your license. If we don't like something about your business, we can force you to change it. We're like your parent, right? We have all the authority over your business as a parent, only none of the liability and none of the responsibility. Oh yeah, and anything you might have heard about how successful our franchisees typically are or may be, we don't stand by any of it. We're not putting our name, we're not giving you any assurances, we're not giving you any even hard numbers. Like they're not even allowed to tell you in writing, this is what you could project to make, this is what our analysis suggests is the opportunity based on the market, based on the population, based on other franchisees in the area. Like if you want to know what other franchisees make in that business, you can't even ask the franchisor. And it's not like they don't have the numbers. They're getting a percentage off the top of every sale. They know the exact numbers of how much revenue the other franchisees are doing. You have to go ask the franchisees yourself and hope they're telling you the truth. Hope that they're not, frankly, like I was, where they're upside down and they're embarrassed and they're feeling like a failure. And if somebody says, well, how's your franchise doing? I'm going, yeah, it's doing great. No, we're really making it. And meanwhile, I'm 30 days behind on my rent. Like you can't say, oh, well, go get your certainty around, how your business is going to do by talking to other people that could be just as screwed as you're potentially about to be. And I'm not saying this is true of all franchises. I'm just saying that the regulations and the structure is set up so that you as the buyer, you as the franchisee, you don't have the visibility, you don't have the transparency, and you don't have the authority to go demand the information that you actually would need to make a really good decision. You have to take so much on faith. That's my problem with it, is it sets up a structure where you have one party that gets paid off the top and has virtually no risk, and you have another party who hopefully gets paid at the end of the day or the end of 3 to 5 years when the notes are paid off, if there's money left over, if they even survive, and they have all the risk, and yet they have no right to the information that would help them make a really, really good decision about whether or not to take on that risk. You see why I maybe have a little bit of an issue with the whole structure? And then let's talk about just the raw economics. So first of all, any typical retail goods and services business, maybe you're aiming for 20% profit margins. Like that's the standard business model. If you probably surveyed 50 different business consultants and said, hey, what's a nice roundabout decent profit margin? I suspect you'd land around 20%. Okay, so this is a model that's built around essentially taking another, or if not one or more layers of the equivalent of another sales tax right off the top. So let's take 8 to 10 to 12% right off the top, knowing that in business, a reasonable profit margin is 20%. So essentially they're saying, okay, you're only gonna actually get to run your business off of 85 to 90% of the income that you bring in. You're still gonna have 100% of the expenses, you're still gonna have 100% of the risk, but you only get 85 to 90% of the revenue. When you're talking about businesses typically having 20% profit margins, losing 10 to 12% of the money on day one, that's a pretty big deal. In a business that could have had a 20% profit margin, your profits just got cut by 50% if there's, to the extent that you ever did hit that 20% profit margin. Okay, I think it's just terrible business to pay people off the top. I mean, in business partnerships, they say never do revenue sharing or any kind of partnership or any sort of debt reduction plan or anything. Never key anything to gross. Always key it to net. Never pay on revenue, always pay on profits. And yet the entire franchise model is based on literally getting paid right in line behind the state government with sales tax. It's crazy. And then you think about, what is a franchisor's business model? The franchisor's business model, that all they do is issue licenses and collect royalty. Supposedly they take the royalties and they grow the brand. And this was one of the most frustrating things about being a local franchisee, is that I was putting money into a marketing fund that the franchisor was supposedly using to grow brand awareness. And I had all these restrictions around what I was actually allowed to do locally. Like if I wanted to sponsor a local Little League team, or if I wanted to have a float in a local parade, or if I wanted to do this or that, I had to run it up the chain. I had to get sign off from corporate. They give me no money for it. I had to pay for it myself on top of the money that I'm giving them for their marketing budget. Meanwhile, what are they doing with their marketing budget? They're saving it up for a Super Bowl commercial that isn't going to air until February. Well, this is October. I need marketing support now. Like you have, that's it, marketing, and what I've learned subsequent to this is that marketing is the single most important piece of business, by far. And yet in the franchise model, generally speaking, it's a model of handing off all of the marketing back to the franchisor and just sending them your money to pay for it and hoping that they know what they're doing. But they're not in the business of selling sandwiches. They're not in the business of selling pizza. They're not in the business of selling oil changes. They're in the business of selling people like you into buying an opportunity to sell pizza or sell sandwiches or sell oil changes. They're not in the same business as you. So what are they incentivized to do with those marketing dollars? And I don't care how nice people are. In business, money drives behavior. And if their financial incentive is to sell more franchises, then they're probably taking at least some of the marketing dollars from their franchisees and reinvesting it into selling more franchise licenses. Well, how does that help you? How does it help you in the long run? I mean, I can say, oh, it creates more brand awareness. BS. As much or more than it creates more brand awareness, it creates more competition. They're going out and finding more franchisees, creating more locations. I even saw this happening in the quick serve restaurant franchise industry in my market during the 2 years that I was basically in that space. I looked at not so much my company, because I was the first in the market and we failed, but other companies, sandwich companies. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to be getting sued here. They would initially say, oh, our target is to have one location for every 100,000 residents in an area. And then a year later, they would revise that and say, well, now we're going to have one location for every 75,000 residents in an area. And then a year later, it was one location for every 50,000, and then every 20,000. Eventually, and you might know which one I'm talking about, it got down to like, we're going to have one location for every 10,000 people. That's ridiculous. Look what you're doing to your franchisees, because the franchisor's incentive is to sell more licenses and to saturate the market penetration, even if it gets to a point of diminishing returns for the individual franchises, because their business model isn't about the success of the individual franchises. It's about the aggregate number of units sold, because they're getting paid pennies on the dollar across the total volume of units sold across their whole brand. So even if it means individual franchisees' businesses shrinking, as long as the whole brand is growing by shoving more and more locations in, which they're able to do by selling more and more licenses, using the marketing budget that you're paying off of royalties, off of your product sales that you're fighting for, but you're not even allowed to go out and do your own marketing to create, because they control all your marketing and they have, strings attached to everything. It's insane. And this isn't just one guy's opinion. Like, go onto forums, literally go into businesses. If you're seriously considering getting involved in a franchise, go into 10 other franchise businesses in your area and actually ask to speak to the owner and be honest with them. Say, hey, look, I'm not trying to sell anything. Business person to business person, I'm looking for some peer feedback. I'm considering, getting involved in a franchise, and if the owner's willing to share their experience with me, I'd love to have an honest conversation. Again, no strings attached, nothing to sell. And, go to 10 or 20 businesses, you'll probably have 2 or 3 conversations that'll be really enlightening. And I suspect you'll figure out that I'm not the only person that sees it this way. But again, the model is set up so that any question you ask before you get involved that's too probing, they say, oh, we're actually not allowed to answer that. We're not allowed to give assurances. We're not allowed to give guarantees. We can't speak to the performance of our other locations. We can't speak to what our future policies will be. As the franchisor, we have the right to revise our policies at any time. And yes, you will be paying us your money off the top, but don't worry, we've got your best interests at heart, because when you win, we win. Wink. That's probably enough. If you're into awesome life stuff and you believe, as I do, that life is meant to be awesome, and that, essentially entrepreneurial thinking, not necessarily being an entrepreneur, but thinking more creatively, thinking more industriously, thinking more strategically, and getting more educated about business can be a conduit to living a more awesome life, then you'll probably love more of my videos. So subscribe to my channel and make sure you click the bell to get notified when I put more videos out, and I will keep bringing you the awesomeness. All right, thanks for your time. I'll see you on the next one.